Today we're going to tackle two different projects on the Stepside Silverado, both of which are going to make it a little bit more pleasant to look at and to listen to. So the first thing we're going to try is some paint correction, which I have absolutely zero experience or really reason to be doing other than I just want to give it a shot. And the second thing, we're going to try to tweak the sound of the exhaust just a little bit. We're like 90% of the way there in terms of how the thing sounds, but I want to bring it home. I want to correct a little bit of drone, and we'll get to that second. But first, let's talk about paint. Now, I know some of the guys I used to work with are probably going to laugh at me in how this is going to turn out. But like I said, I want to give it a shot because I don't want to spend a gazillion dollars on the paint on this thing. I didn't want to paint the original hood because if I did that, then the rest of the truck would look bad and I'd probably just have to paint the entire thing. I don't want to do that just yet, but the original hood it kind of looked like trash because the paint is like chipping off. You see those big missing sections of clear coat and base coat down to the primer, and it has that like awful texture on it. So this had to go, but I did have a viewer bring me a junkyard hood that they found, and this one looks, believe it or not, 100 times better than that hood, although it is starting to do something similar with the paint kind of breaking up. But because it wasn't a junkyard, it has a few scuffs and scrapes here and there, but overall the hood is straight, it's the right color, we don't have to paint it, and I think with a little bit of love, we can make this hood kind of match the rest of the truck, because the paint is not great. I mean, the sides are pretty good, the roof definitely has some fading, but that doesn't bother me as bad as the checkerboard or whatever that is. So anyway, I am going to try my hand at buffing this paint to try to bring a little bit of life back into it and make it look just a little bit shinier. So I didn't have any supplies to do this job. I went down to Harbor Freight and I did a little looking around, and it seems that orbital buffers are kind of like the thing right now. Apparently they're easier to use and they put less heat into the panel than a rotary buffer. So I figured for an inexperienced person like myself when it comes to paint correction, that's the perfect place to start. So down to Harbor Freight for about $100, I grabbed the 7.5 amp Bauer rotary buffer. Now this thing is like, I have no idea. It could be garbage, it could be great, but we're going to give it a shot. And along with the buffer, I grabbed 3 separate pads. I think they had a 4th one, but I grabbed one for compound, one for polishing, and one for finishing. And then just a little 12-pack of microfiber towels. Once again, I have no idea if this stuff is going to work, but I grabbed some anyway. And then I went to Amazon and I picked up some of this Chemical Guys cutting compound, the 32, the 36, and some of this sealant, I guess. Now, to be honest, guys, I have no idea if any of this stuff is compatible. I have no idea what compounds I should have got. You can buy like a multi-pack with 6 different steps and stuff like that. But I don't think this truck necessarily justifies like a Riddler award-winning level of refinish because it's an old, faded truck and I just want to make the hood look a little bit better. So I have 2 different compounds, some sealant and a rotary buffer, and 0 experience. So let's jump right in. So the first thing I will say that I noticed is this orange pad on here. This is like the coarse one, and it definitely seems like, I don't know, it seems a little bit harder than I would have imagined a buffing pad should feel, especially compared to like some of those old wool pads I'm used to. But I guess let's just give it a shot and see what happens. They say you got to start out with just a couple of drops of this compound on the pad, so here we go. A little excited there. So the only problem with buffing this hood out is now I feel like the rest of the truck is just not going to be quite as glossy and as shiny as the new hood that we have on here. So unfortunately, at some point, I'm probably going to have to bite the bullet and either hire out somebody to completely buff this whole truck or just take the time to do it myself, which I really don't want to. But that being said, I'm really impressed with how the hood is turning out for someone like me who's basically got no skill when it comes to paint correction at all. But here's kind of how it looks. In terms of these little cracks in the paint, there's really nothing we can do about that because that's just what happens with these GM hoods apparently. Like, that guy is just a worse example of what this could turn into. But for now, at least it looks a whole lot glossier over here than it does on this side. And a lot of the scratches that were in the hood from being in the junkyard, we were able to get most of those out. So I'm definitely happy. We've got 2 stages done over here. We have the coarse compound and pad, and then the medium pad and the polishing compound. So I'll use that treatment next over here to bring this half up to the same quality as that. This is by far the worst spot of the hood right through here. There's a ton of scratches and stuff, like either somebody, wiped off a bunch of crusty snow with dirt and stuff underneath it, or it just, from being in the junkyard for a while. But we definitely can make this look better and give it a little bit more gloss and take away some of the scratches. And then what we'll do is we'll just hit it with some sealant to kind of protect the paint a little bit. And then we'll peel off the tape and see how good of a job we did. So the job is complete, and in total we had 3 separate steps, starting with the 32 compound, we moved on to the 36 compound, and then finally we put on the Jet Seal product. And the reason I grabbed this, I actually grabbed the Jet Seal and their wax. And I chose this stuff because it says it'll give it a 1-year kind of protective layer or whatever. And it also makes it look a little bit glossier, kind of helps the water and dirt kind of run off, I suppose. But the real reason why I chose that stuff is because I kind of want to give the paint a little bit more protection to hopefully slow down the cracking of the clear coat or whatever process is going on. In theory, that stuff has like some UV blockers in it, and maybe, I don't know for sure, but I think it'll kind of help that, or at least slow down that process. In terms of the Harbor Freight stuff, no major complaints. I think the only problem I had is the Velcro backing on this stuff is so strong. I ripped the backing off of the first coarse pad because there's like this little white cloth layer, and that's what actually makes the pad stick onto the backing plate. And at first, once I stuck it on there, it was on there so tight. When I went to pull it off to clean it, I think I tore the corner, and then later on while I was buffing, the pad just kind of fell apart. But the fine pad and the polishing pad, those worked flawlessly, no problems there. And in terms of the finished product, I like it, but the only thing is now the rest of the truck looks kind of bad in comparison. So I think I'm gonna have to get the whole truck buffed eventually. And this is a really good spot right here. So when it's all done, it looks nice and dark and it makes it look a little bit deeper. And then of course over here, the untouched paint that it's faded, it's oxidized, and yeah, we could turn all this into looking probably better than that because the paint is not cracking like it is on the hood. But I honestly don't have the patience to do this, guys. So I think what I'm gonna do is at some point I'll hire somebody, a mobile detailer or whatever, to come in here and buff this entire truck, top to bottom, front to back, and hopefully it'll look so much better, which I know it will. I just don't want to put in the time and effort myself because, to be honest, I kind of hate doing this type of work. It looks good and it's rewarding, but it's just not something that I enjoy. Now, speaking of stuff that I enjoy, that's exhaust and mechanical work, and that's kind of what we're going to take care of next. So there's two reasons why we're going to be making some changes today to the exhaust system, and the most important reason is actually not sound at all. The most important reason has to do with driveline angle. See, when we lowered the truck, the rear axle is now quite a bit higher, and I took it out for a drive and I don't have any real vibrations, but the angles on the front and rear of the drive shaft are not similar. And I want to raise the rear of the transmission just a little bit, probably by about an inch, to hopefully get rid of some angle. Because I think the first joint, if I remember, had a working angle of like 4 or 5 degrees, and I want to get that down just a little bit lower. So I'm going to raise the back of the transmission, but in order to do that, I actually need to redesign the mid pipe of the exhaust, because where it runs right now, it kind of gets pretty close to the floor of the truck. And if I raise the tail shaft by an inch, I think it'll hit the floor. So I want to redesign the middle section, but along the way, I kind of also wanted to get rid of the X pipe, because I think that's contributing to a little bit of drone, and it doesn't really do anything for sound now that I have the mufflers arranged the way that I do. So we'll get rid of the X pipe, and I also have some high flow cats I feel like I should probably throw in there just to kind of, you know, help the planet or whatever. You know, you're supposed to have cats on there, but also it'll tame down the sound just a little bit further, because I have no complaints about this truck other than when, like, say in a drive-through or something like that, or if I'm standing outside, it does sound good, but it also resonates quite a bit. And I think those cats and getting rid of the X pipe will help the problem. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get our hands dirty. Well, like a lot of my projects, this quickly escalated into something that was quite a bit bigger in scope than I had originally anticipated. But now that it's done, I am really, really pleased with the system, where before I was kind of like mediocre at best, because in the mid pipe, I was never really crazy about the way that it looked and the way that it fit together. But now that we've gone 100% custom, I am really, really stoked. And now I just hope it sounds exactly like I want. We're like 95% of the way there before, and I think now this will push us over the edge. So starting the very beginning, part of this process was due to the spacer I wanted to put on the back of the transmission. I wound up going with a 1/2 inch spacer, and that took me from a 5-degree working angle on the front U-joint down to a 2.9 degree on the front and a 2.2 degree on the back at the differential. So that right there is probably worth it. That gives me a much more consistent driveline angle, so that is good. And then on top of that, I wanted to make this whole system a little bit easier to service. So like, for example, if I wanted to pull the transmission or the transfer case, it might be a little bit easier if I remove the middle section of the exhaust. But because of where they put the slip fit connector right here, you know, you've got to slide the back half of the exhaust out, probably 2 inches. And to do that, I don't have enough room with the way I built the rest of the system. So basically I'd have to take the tailpipe off, I'd have to take the muffler off, and then I could finally get the middle section of the exhaust out of the way. So I wanted to get rid of these little slip fit connectors, so replace it with a V-band, but I also needed to extend that connection just a little bit, because where Speed Engineering puts this joint right here, basically there's the torsion bar cross member like here, and there's another welded on cross member just behind it. So there's a lot going on, and it was very difficult to get access to these clamps. Of course, I didn't want to get rid of the X pipe because I felt like that was sort of contributing maybe to some of the drone. But then finally, this part may sound a little bit crazy, but when I was kind of working with this material, like I'd pick it up and I'd just kind of tap it with my hand a couple of times, and it would almost make that same exact frequency of vibration or drone that I was hearing when the truck was running. And it was the weirdest thing, because like the truck could be sitting there idling and I could get out and stand next to it, like right here by the door. And it was almost louder here than it was out the back where the actual exhaust was coming. So it was like everything under the truck was just vibrating, and it had this really awful sound that I could not stand. And every time I changed something, you know, from the muffler back, it would help it a little bit, but it never really truly went away. So I think, I could be totally crazy, but I think whatever material that pipe is made out of, it's a little bit thinner stainless steel. I think that was contributing to some of that drone or vibration. It's just like the sound waves going through the exhaust pipe would just rattle everything and it made sound. So the new system that I've built is still made from stainless steel, but it's a little bit thicker, and when you like hit it with the palm of your hand, it makes a little bit different sound and a little bit more quieted tone, I don't know, than this stuff here. So I feel like the material that is built from is going to help. I feel like the catalytic converters are going to help, because you know that'll take a little bit away of that raspy poppiness that some of these trucks have. We've got V-bands now at the back of the cat, so if I ever want to service this thing, I can just pop a V-band there, pop a V-band there, and the middle section of the exhaust will pop right out, and I can leave everything from there to the bumper in place, so that'll make my life easier. We added a couple of bungs back there so we can put the O2 sensors in, so that'll let the cats do their thing. Yeah, so that's the complete system, guys. All in, I think I've got about 2.5 to 3 days on this project, where it definitely sounds like a lot, but there was also a lot that went into it, because on top of building the exhaust, I had to put a little bit of a notch in the heat shield, because when I raised the transmission, the header on the passenger side got really, really close to the heat shield, but there's an air gap on the top. So I just made a little oval right above where the V-band clamp sat, and that gave me a little bit more room. And then finally, I also built this notch in the cross member, because where the driver's side pipe comes up and over the cross member, and it has to go back down and then level out, because the floorboard is pretty close, and I have my first cat sitting here and the second cat sits behind it where there's a lot more room. So anyway, I had to have a little bit more clearance the way that I chose to ran the pipes. So that, that adds a little bit of time here and there. Notching the heat shield added time. Building the spacer for the cross member, or for the transmission mount, that adds time. And then just, we're TIG welding every single joint here. And I am a little bit particular about how everything fits up, because I hate these joints that like this X pipe has here, because they ship this in a box and you're supposed to clamp it together. And they have all these flared connections that slip together. And yeah, I welded them, but I don't like looking at them when I'm underneath the truck, where instead of this flare and then a slip fit that's welded together, we just got a bunch of butt connections, which to me, that looks so much cleaner and so much nicer. So we've got V-bands, we've got butt welds, 100% stainless steel, cats, O2 bungs, made some extensions there to move the clamps. That is the finished product, guys. So now I've got to get it underneath the truck and we'll do a quick sound test. Well, the good news is that the exhaust is done. It does not leak, and the catalytic converters now took away a little bit of that choppiness or raspiness that happens in the mid-range. That was never really like a huge complaint. It kind of annoyed me, but it wasn't enough of a big deal that I wanted to make a huge change. Now, the cats did definitely help there, but I think by getting rid of the X-pipe, I actually made the drone worse. I think the X-pipe that was in there somehow had a cancellation effect on some of the drone, and now it's actually worse, and kind of much worse to be honest. But the silver lining here is that it is very, very prominent at a very specific RPM rather than over a wide RPM range. It's like 16 or 1700 RPM is where it drones awful, and anywhere outside of that range is actually pretty darn close to where I want it to be. So because it's at a very specific RPM range, I can now cancel that drone with a quarter wave resonator, and I'll show you this in an upcoming video. We'll be brief about it, but basically a quarter wave resonator or a J-pipe goes into the exhaust on one end and it deadheads on the other. Just it's cut to a very specific length, and that bounces sound waves back into the exhaust at just the right time to cancel each other out, basically. And I'll show you all the calculations and all the formulas to figure out what length to tune that to in an upcoming video. I am frustrated about this process. I mean, I love building exhaust, don't get me wrong. I love TIG welding and I love the challenge of routing the pipes where you want them to go, but I just hate that I've made so many changes without really making headway. Like, I started this whole project off with that one Flowmaster muffler that I wanted to run that had that really cool sound to it, which it did, but there it was too loud and it droned. So now we got it quieter, but it still drones, and it's like, I would much rather have a loud exhaust that does not drone than a quiet exhaust that does. So we're getting closer every iteration, but I really am jealous of cars like, you know, the Hellcat Challengers or the Corvettes, that they're kind of loud and aggressive, but they're not obnoxious. They don't drone. And, you know, it'd be nice to have a team of exhaust engineers, you know, working around the clock to be able to do all these computations and figure out the right style of muffler. And, you know, because I'm trying to balance a few different things here. I'm trying to balance sound because you want it to sound cool, and I'm trying to balance performance because You know, for a 4.8 that's just got a cam in it, yes, a 3-inch going into a single 4-inch exhaust system is definitely overkill. But remember, we have an LSA supercharger sitting right over there in the corner that's about to get installed. So I wanted to be able to have an exhaust system that would actually flow enough to support that. And don't worry, the cats that are in here, they definitely will support that power level. So we've got one more step to do on the exhaust, and I'll be brief about it, but it's a frustrating thing to go through, guys. So thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging in there. The truck looks better now that we have the hood buffed out. It does sound a little bit better, but it's not where I want it. So let's see. In next week's video, we're going to be doing the unboxing of the LSA, and then I think we're going to be doing some 0 to 60 testing on both trucks, because we did a re-gear job on this one and we did a different torque converter in the other truck. So I am kind of curious to see, 0 to 60 and 1/8 mile, how much of an improvement we made just by doing those two different things, re-gearing and a torque converter. So we'll check that out. And then after we get all that squared away, it's time to start the LSA install, and I cannot wait for that. So thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you again soon.